Okay, cool. So I guess we're going to talk about how to contribute to Apache Spark. While I am on the Spark PMC, this represents my own personal views and does not necessarily represent that of the project or the other people who work on Spark. We have different opinions, and that's one of the things that makes open source software great. So I'm Holden. My preferred pronouns are she or her. I'm a co-author of Learning Spark and High Performance Spark. And I also live stream code reviews. I'm going to do a live stream code review tomorrow morning as well, if anyone's interested in seeing that. And we'll talk a bit about the code review process as we're going today. In addition to who I am professionally, I'm trans, queer, Canadian, living in America on an H-1B work visa that expires in April. So that's really exciting. And part of the leather community. And you might be going, Holden, this is in no way related to Apache Spark. And that is correct to a degree. But I think for those of us who are making open source tools like Spark or machine learning tools, it's important that we try and build diverse communities, which is part of my goal of trying to get more people involved. One of the things that we have to do to actually make sure we have diverse communities is talk about where we're all from. Okay, so we're gonna explore getting a change into Apache Spark. We're gonna look at code contributions. We're also gonna look at things beyond just code contributions, and we'll talk about the tooling that's gonna be involved in making this possible. So I'm hoping you're nice people. If you don't like pictures of cats, this is probably not the talk for you. There are many other fine talks though. And I'm assuming that you may know some Apache Spark. Is there anyone here who is completely new to Apache Spark? Any friends? No. Okay. If you are and you don't feel comfortable enough to raise your hand, that's okay. You can even contribute to Spark, even if you don't actually know how to use Spark yet. And I think there's value, especially in new contributors, that they bring that the rest of us don't necessarily see. So why do we want to contribute to Spark? Maybe we want to fix the problems that we're experiencing with Spark. Maybe we want to learn about distributed systems, right? We want to learn things. Maybe you want to trick more people into using functional programming. Or maybe you just like hacking on random projects. All of these things are fine. If you have a different reason you want to contribute to Spark, that's totally fine too. I think a lot of us start out with like wanting to fix our own bugs. But some of us also just start out because we just love it. So there's a relatively large Spark community, especially compared to other open source projects. And this is really great. You know, there's lots of other people. And there's active PMCs and committers, so like your code can get reviewed, things are getting merged, releases are happening. These are all good things. Although there's a lot of concentration in the SF Bay Area. Although this has been getting a lot better recently, I still think that one of the things that we could do is try and grow the Spark development community outside of the Bay Area for when that big earthquake comes, or when PG&E decides to turn off the power again, which shut off our build bots for a week. You know, there's sort of various things which happen when you're all physically co-located. So there's a bunch of different ways to contribute to Spark. We can write code, and we can contribute our code directly into Spark. We can build packages on top of Spark and share those with people. We can do code reviews. We can review pull requests that are proposed in Spark. We can fix the things that Spark is depending on, or as I like to call it, yak shaving. And we can also do advocacy, right? We can write books, we can give talks, and we can write blog posts. And we can also answer people's questions. And the last one, which I think is I'm surprised more people don't do, because just from a self-interest perspective, the ROI on it is amazing, is you can do testing and release validation, all right? And we'll talk about that. I think the ROI on this one is really clear if it's a thing that you have to explain to your boss about why you're spending time on open source. Direct code contributions have high visibility. It can take a lot longer to get changes into Spark than you might expect. That's just the joys of open source and lazy consensus. You can write code and packages on top of Spark, right? And that has really great implications for things like formats or standalone features that can be developed outside of Spark, but there's things which just don't fit there. Fixing things that Spark depends on is really great, but you have to be the kind of person who's okay with like a 6 to 8 month delayed gratification, because you'll fix a problem in a thing that Spark is using, and then Spark will have to have a release, and we only update dependencies normally in major version changes, so it takes a while for those changes to actually be visible to you. Code reviews, I think, are amazing. They're very high visibility, and I think they're easier to time box, right? Writing a feature, that can take a sort of unknown amount of time. Reviewing other people's code, if you only get halfway through it, you still have value, right? Although it's a little bit less tracked in some metrics, if that's a thing that you care about or your employer cares about. Documentation and advocacy can be time boxed, or it can be also a very unbounded sort of thing if you start going and giving talks. So testing and release validation, which I really hope more people will start doing. You can join the dev list and you can look for vote threads. You can check out preview releases. And this has just so much value because not a lot of people do this right now. So the community would really benefit from more people doing testing and release validation. So just running your Spark jobs on the new proposed versions of Spark. And conversely, you also get a lot of benefit out of this too, right? If you notice issues in Spark before a release happens, like we can actually fix those problems before you have to deal with them in a real production use case, right? And this is great because your problems will actually get addressed. On the other hand, if you come to us after the release is already cut, yeah, okay, we might get to it in the next one, but the time where like people are really focused on fixing all of the bugs is right as we're trying to get a release. So if you notice a regression during that period in time, it's just so much more effective, and your Spark jobs will continue to run much more reliably. So that's really great. You can also join out and help users. If you're tired of being able to reach inbox 0 too easily, you can subscribe to the user list. All kinds of fun, but you probably want to make some filters. Unfortunately, you have to do that in your own mail client. I tried looking at all of the ML issues for a while, and that was overwhelming, and so I narrowed it down to like the parts of PySpark which I've worked on. And you can narrow it down to the parts of Spark that you're familiar with some filtering rules. And we can do all kinds of other things here too. You don't just have to look at the user list. You can look at Stack Overflow questions. You can write blog posts, tools to explain errors. And we can also contribute code directly to Spark. This is the part where we can fix the bugs that we're encountering in Spark, or we can add the features that we really want. In between talks, I was just talking with someone about a feature that I want to try and convince him to add to Spark. And he admitted that he would be capable of writing it, but he doesn't necessarily have the time. And that can sort of be the challenge with this approach, is that this can take a lot of time. And it can be very difficult. But let's take a look at this, right? So Spark is a whole bunch of different pieces, and making changes to these different pieces has very different sort of user experiences. And let's talk about that. So if you're trying to change functionality in Spark core, you are going to receive a lot of scrutiny, and justifiably so. Everything else is built on top of it, and the documentation for it is occasionally non-existent, right? And since we depend so much on this, and we don't necessarily know how everything works, people are very conservative about changes here. If you want to make changes to ML, if you want to add like small little tweaks, people are pretty happy. Adding new algorithms, people are fairly resistive to, because for one thing, you can build them in a package separately. And for the other thing, when we add a new algorithm, we kind of take on maintaining it. And there's this sort of question from new people who show up, like, are you going to be around to help us fix all of the issues in the algorithm that comes up? Or am I going to be stuck maintaining, Alice's special linear regression 72 algorithm, right? And I don't want to take that on. Structured streaming, I think it's a bit difficult to participate in structured streaming in SQL outside of the Bay Area and outside of sort of that network. It's getting better. It used to be very challenging. But a lot of the decisions happen sort of locally there. If you're interested in improving Spark's handling in other languages, you can improve coverage of current APIs. This is relatively easy work to do because you can go and you can look and see how the APIs have been implemented in other places, and then it's normally just slight tweaking. And then there's also improving the performance, and there's been a lot of work on that lately, and I think it's an excellent area for people to work. And we can also contribute to improving Spark on the various cluster managers that it can run on top of. You know, I probably wouldn't bother contributing to Mesos unless I deployed a large Mesos shop, and the same thing with any of these. If you happen to have a large Spark deployment that sits on top of Kubernetes, you'll probably find some bugs or features that you wish Spark integrated there, and you can help contribute those back. And the same is true on Yarn. Spark uses JIRA. You should sign up for it. And we can go ahead and we can look at the issues in JIRA. And this is the place where we want to go before we start making code changes. The first sort of step is to go and look and see, have other people encountered the same issue? Did someone maybe make some progress on resolving it and write some notes or something? And so we'll go and take a look at it. So we can search for issues. If we don't find anything, we can create new issues. Please search for issues first. Doing JIRA triage is really boring, and a lot of that is because of duplicated issues. And we can comment and let people know that we're working on things. And even if we don't succeed at solving it completely, we can leave notes about the approaches that we tried, so the next person who comes along doesn't have to relearn the hard lessons we've learned. And we can also ask for clarification from the other people. Maybe the person who reported the issue can help sort of clarify what's going on. You can't assign issues to yourself, which is a choice. Some people find that annoying. I don't particularly care, but I've probably worked in this way for too long. Posting long design documents, if you want to make really big changes to Spark, you don't want to just write a 20-page document in JIRA comments. That is not great. Instead, try using something like Google Docs, where people can more interactively comment and leave suggestions for you. And we'll talk about SPIPs and how that's related in a little bit. Okay, here's a picture of JIRA for those of you who aren't familiar with JIRA. Congratulations on escaping JIRA, but that time is coming to an end. Okay, great. So how do we find a good starter issue? So we could look for issues with the starter issue tag. Unfortunately, that doesn't work out so well. I would say it's been inconsistently applied. There are some problems which, when I look at them, they're tagged with starter issue that are refactor Spark scheduler. And I'm just no. Instead, I think the actual way to do it, and I know this is not ideal, is to read through a lot of Spark issues and just pick one that looks easy to you. That being said, you can look at who reported it. If it's someone who's reported a lot of other issues and those issues seem to make progress, or if it's someone who tends to be responsive and answer your questions, then that can be a really good sign. If an issue was reported by a committer or a PMC member, that can be a good sign and a bad sign. It can be a good sign because they care about it and they'll take the time to review it. On the other hand, they didn't solve it, so you have to ask yourself why. Sometimes it's intentional, leaving things for other people to solve. Sometimes it's oh, these are some small things, I just don't have time for them. And sometimes it's well, this is really broken, I don't know how to solve this. Whatever, someone will get to it. That happens a lot with my code. The other one is, despite using issue tracking, we still have to-dos in a lot of places. And you can just grep for those to-dos, try and find the issues, Looking at the differences between the language APIs, unfortunately, we don't really have good tooling here, but you can just go and bring up the APIs side by side and look through, and then you'll be like, oh, hey, what's up? This functionality is missing in Python. Maybe I should go and add it in Python. Oh, right, and checking deprecations. This is like, how would I put this? Perhaps not the most fun and exciting work, right? Because like when we see deprecation warnings in our build, we're not like, you know what I want to do? Go and fix those. Unless we're just like, oh God, the color yellow or red on my terminal, I can't handle this. But if you're the kind of person who gets excited to upgrade API usage, please come. We have so many deprecations. Oh God. And part of this, some of those can't be fixed because Spark tries to maintain compatibility across a wide variety of things. And as such, sometimes we have to use older APIs that are consistently available. And in those cases, even just like adding notes about them is still really valuable so that we actually know like, hey, using this API is intentional, not we're just using this old API because it's like no one bothered to upgrade it. While you're reading through all of these issues, you can help with bug triage. Who likes triaging bugs? You, I can't make out your face from here, but we should be friends and you should triage my bugs. Okay, so the nice thing is, right, as we're reading through, we can sort of triage the bugs, right? You can add the tag for starter issues. You can take off the tag for starter issue for the person who told you to, refactor the Spark scheduler. You can look at things that are questions in the bug tracker and help guide people back to the mailing list, right? You can also notice occasionally people will how would I put this? Incorrectly estimate the impact of the issue that they have filed. And this can go in either direction, right? It can be absolutely critical that we have a 1% performance slowdown in Python, maybe not. Or a minor issue that we lose the data, right? And in those cases, like while you're reading through, you'll be able to be like, you know what? That sounds really important. And then you can ask people and you can help triage this. And importantly, if you notice things that should or should not be blockers, those can have big impacts in the release process. And it's okay to not look at all of the issues. I just want you to look through some of the issues until you find something that you're excited about. Maybe find 2 things that you're excited about in case one of them leaves you sad later on. You have something to come back to without doing triage again. So the other thing that we can do is we can find and comment on SPIPs. I don't think for the people who are perhaps new to Spark, you should start out by proposing a big change to Spark. However, a great thing to do is take a look at the large structural changes that are proposed in Spark, and if they're in the area where you're working, leave comments about if they're going to positively or negatively impact your workflows, right? Like, these are the kind of changes which, if we accept them, it's really hard for us to just revert later, right? And so this is a chance for you to take a part in the design discussions of Spark. Okay, yeah, here's an SPIP or something. Yeah, so generally speaking, Spark wishes to maintain compatibility between releases, but we're in this special time now. We're in this magic time where we can break everything. Yes, that's so exciting. So much fun. I mean, we probably shouldn't actually break everything, but there are a whole bunch of changes that we can do right now that are going to be really annoying to do at any other time. So if you want to get involved in Spark, now is an exciting time where there's like way less safeguards, right? And that sounds like a good time to get involved with a project when we took the safety rails off, right? I see one person who definitely agrees with me. So I think it's a really fun time to get involved with Spark. Spark's on GitHub. You make a fork of it. You clone it locally. If you're not familiar with Git, once again, congratulations and my apologies at the same time. There are some great tutorials online, and don't feel bad if it makes no sense. It's completely normal. Okay, here's a picture of GitHub for those of you who haven't seen it. Building Spark. So Spark has two different build tools because consistency is overrated. Now that being said, all of our public releases are built with Maven now. I tend to work with SBT locally because even though Maven does have access to many of the same things that SBT does for speeding up Spark, for speeding up Spark's build, I still find the SBT build to be a little faster for incremental builds. If you're working in Python, unfortunately, you do still have to build the Scala code first. And that's because the Python code depends on the Scala code. And if you find yourself getting really weird errors that make no sense while you're writing Python code, rebuild your Scala code. Because, like, first off, that's a good 30-minute break to go for a walk. And secondly, also sometimes things just get slightly out of match, and that's why it's all broken. In theory, we can also build Spark with a tool called Bloop. And excitingly, Bloop builds Spark really, really fast. However, the tests do not succeed, which make me suspicious about the quality of the build produced. So do not use Bloop yet today. But if anyone here is really excited about build tools in XML files, you can help make Bloop work with Spark, and we'll have faster build times. That'll be good. Slightly less icebergs will melt from building Spark again and again. Okay. So what about if you want to improve the documentation, right? Maybe you found this thing which is kind of confusing. I think I was talking with Ruben about this, where he was looking at a thing and he was just like, does it bring it all back to the driver, or does it stay on the executors but get shuffled around weirdly? And I was like, oh yeah, I can see how this documentation is confusing. This is what the actual behavior is. I tried to convince him to update the documentation and did not succeed. But hopefully you will listen to me, fine friends, because who doesn't love editing Markdown? Okay, that was, okay. So we can build Spark's documentation. That being said, I tend to build it while skipping the API build because that involves rebuilding all of Spark, and also I don't use Spark R, and it involves installing a bunch of R packages, and I don't really care. But if you do care about R, or you're changing the API documentation, don't set skip API to 1, just set it to 0, and then you can do your build. Yeah. Oh, and it depends on Ruby because why not? Okay, cool. So maybe you've decided you want to make code changes. You've decided on the area that you want to work. How do we find our way around the project for real? So it's organized into sub-projects by directory, more or less. A lot of people like IntelliJ. I've worked on Spark for long enough that I remember the file names of everything, which is not a good thing. But I use this thing called Magit. So I can press Control-XT and tab complete a file name, and that is much faster than any of the other IDEs, but it is terrible, so don't do that unless you also know all of the file names, in which case I'm not sure why you're in this talk. But that's okay. And there are new exciting tools for doing Scala code completion and stuff like that. That actually work. It's really exciting. And you can get them to work with Emacs, but it's kind of weird. Anyways, if you're an Emacs user, come and talk to me in the hallway, and we can talk more about my .emacs file and how it is totally the coolest. Otherwise, for the rest of you, IntelliJ is pretty legit. If you're a Vim user, I don't know. I'm out of ideas, but I'm sure it's very great too. I have no way to help you. Okay, so an important thing to do is test that your issue has actually been fixed. This can be a little bit frustrating. If you try and run all of Spark's tests, you are in for a, depending on your computer, 2 to 5 hour wait. So you might not want to do that. Unless you're paid by the hour, in which case, okay. The other thing is, like, when you're first trying to fix it, I think using the Spark shell is a really good way to validate your changes have been fixed before you spend all of the time to write a unit test. But if you're into test-driven development, that's okay too. There's no judgment. Also, there is a Spark style guide. Please follow the style guide. If you don't, the first comments on your pull request are going to be things that are like indent here, indent here, indent here, remove space, reorder your imports. And like, I'm willing to do that, but I don't like doing that. So please follow the style guide. Even if it passes the linter, it doesn't mean that it follows the style guide. So please read the style guide. Please always add tests, right? I'm totally fine if you want to start out validating your code with the Spark shell, but please add a test. If you can't figure out how to add a test, that's okay. That's okay. Some parts of Spark are really, really annoying to test. And please do still make your pull request with your fix, but expect to have a discussion around how to test it, right? And one of the things you can do is you can help other people figure out how to test their code. Yep. Okay, if you're changing Spark's APIs, we have a binary compatibility checker. For now, though, we can just be like, nah, it's cool, it's cool. That being said, if you change like super core APIs, people may still have a conversation with you about why you decided to remove parallelize from the Spark context, right? So it's a way for us to sort of be intentional about the changes we're making. Just because MIMA fails, it doesn't mean that we don't want to make the change necessarily, but it helps us be intentional and make these choices. Yeah, we're in 3, so all kinds of fun. Sometimes it's a bit sensitive, and we'll fire off false warnings as well. Right, oh, I argued about which editor. Damn it, I guess this was a note to myself to be a better person. We'll try for next time. Yeah. So making the change, I'm going to assume that you know the programming language that you want to make your change in. If you don't, Spark is probably not a great project to learn how to work in Scala or Python. Maybe pick a different project for your first project. But if you already know Python or Scala, it's great. R as well, Java, all kinds of things. Python API parity updates are relatively small. I think they're a great place to get started. And one of the reasons for this is that if you're not particularly interested in Python, but interested in something else, the Python API normally has to match our other APIs. And by working on the Python API parity improvements, you learn more about the thing that you eventually want to do for real. And I'm not saying this just because I am like semi-responsible for the Python API and occasionally don't want to update it. That's not why I'm saying it, for sure. Okay, now we get to make a PR. Yay! Please put the JIRA name in the title of your PR. This makes it a lot easier for us to figure out what's going on. If you've contributed many times before, tests will automatically run. If it's your first contribution, someone has to come along and say, like, it's okay for the test to run, so don't worry about that. There's this AppSpot link where you can go and look at the Spark pull requests. And this is nice because the GitHub UI has opportunities for improvement, to use a phrase from my last performance review. Okay, there's at least some people laughing at the bad jokes. I feel better. Okay, and now it's time for our code review. Yay! Who's excited? Yay, okay, reaction from the audience. Okay, I think code reviews should be done in the open. If you're the only person contributing to Spark from your company, then that will of course have to happen. However, if you're inside of a company where there are other people contributing to Spark, they may have a different policy where they do an internal review first. I would encourage you to forget that as much as possible. I'm not responsible if you lose your job for doing that, but I would encourage you to suggest that comments live in the open, and I think that's really great. Okay, actual code review. Most often committers will eventually come and review your code. You can ping them on GitHub. Please don't ping people inside of the first 24 hours of making your pull request, unless it's like an absolutely critical issue. Then people are just likely to snooze notifications from you. So please give people time to discover things organically. You can also look at the shepherd of the JIRA and the person who wrote the code with git blame. People might say, yay, they might ask for changes. Not all PRs get in. That doesn't mean that you're a bad person or that your code's bad. It just means that we don't have a consensus about what we want to do here. And that is okay. Okay, here's a pull request that I wrote a long time ago. And we can watch how many comments it takes. Oh, wow. Okay. Cool. And so, I contribute to Spark a fair amount, and I know my way around a bit, I would say. But even with that, it can still take a lot of comments. So please don't get discouraged if your pull request takes a lot of comments. And that's okay. Please do not get discouraged. You are not going to the vet. It is okay. Okay, the cat jokes are not working. Sometimes in Spark, if no one will tell you no, they're just being very California about it, and they don't want the confrontation of telling you no. And so sometimes, if no one talks to you, it's because they want you to come up with a different solution. While we're waiting, please keep your pull requests up to date. Super important. We don't really do the auto close anymore, but I still think it's worth keeping your pull request up to date. Okay, and now I want to talk really quickly about how open source code reviews are like mermaid school, and you should definitely join mermaid school and doing open source code reviews. So it builds on your existing skills of swimming or Scala. You get better with time, but you need to start somewhere, and it's okay if you do not start out being a mermaid. You will get there. People sometimes don't understand how it helps grow your skills, and they don't want to pay for it. I, for example, was only able to get 50% of mermaid school reimbursed from my old employer. It was very sad. And I had a really convincing argument about it. Also, coffee makes it better. It turns out if you're really sleepy at mermaid school, you might drown. And if you're really sleepy on the internet, you might be an asshole. So in both cases, drink coffee first, or your preferred beverage of the morning. And I think it's really important that we don't burn out the Spark maintainers. Even though reviewing code is often considered to be less fun, I think it's really important. More diverse reviewers will lead us to more diverse solutions. And you can represent the users, right? I have a lot of bias because I've worked on Spark for so long. Occasionally things just look right to me that are totally not. We've just done it this way for way too long, and I need someone else to come along and tell me hey, Holden, no one actually wants to do it this way. We've just done it that way for 6 years. And I'm like, oh shit, okay. Guess I'll write a better API. Okay, here's a rate of PRs to reviews. The blue line is PRs created. This is not just on Spark, to be clear. We don't have 40,000 pull requests per day on Spark. If we did, yeah, I drink a lot more, but we don't, thank God. Okay, so you get benefits from doing this. You grow your skills. You get to see the world, not a guarantee. Where in the world is defined as your favorite GitHub repo, though, yes. And you also can maybe get faster recognition. There are so many people who contribute code to Spark, and I love them all, or at least 80% of them. But there are less people who review code in Spark, and I remember their names a lot more than all of the code that's coming in, right? Because I see the reviewers, I see their judgment really quickly, and it's a lot easier to be like, oh yeah, that person, I trust they know what they're doing. That's great, yeah. They said this is fine, okay. Okay, yeah, possible faster recognition. It's also easier to control your time doing code reviews compared to adding features. Adding features, you kind of have to carry it over the finish line if you want it to happen. You know, and this can take a really long time in Spark. I have pull requests that have been going on for a year, right? Now it's not normal, but it does happen. You can use essentially the same techniques to find good PRs to review as we use to find starter issues, except we look at this PR dashboard instead of JIRA. Yeah, okay. I'm running a little low on time, but if you're interested in pull request reviews, oh yeah, this part matters. Communicate carefully, please. Don't be an asshole unintentionally. I'm occasionally guilty of this. I think we can all do better about this. And yeah, cool. If you want, I have live streams. We're not going to do one now. We got 4 minutes. Yeah, no. Big changes. This is not the time to make them. Talk about it with people on the dev list first, but also make smaller changes to Spark first to build community trust. And you can totally fix problems in the things Spark depends on. Also, you should buy my books. These are not all my books, which is why we'll advance to the next slide, of High Performance Spark. And this is the book where I realized you can negotiate royalties. So this is the book that you should buy because I make more money on it. Okay, also, if there are children in your life and you perhaps wish that they didn't like computers as much, you can try and teach them distributed computing at distributedcomputingforkids.com. I'm joking, hopefully this will actually get them excited about computers, but going beyond looking at Instagram and learning how to write wonderful PySpark code and all that fun. Okay, so this is the K-Thanks bye time. I think we've got time for a few questions. If anyone has questions, I would love to answer questions. There's microphones right
Yes,
here.
give it a big hand to Golden. Hope you're all inspired today. We've got about 3.5 minutes, and we can take questions on either side. So Daniel, go ahead first.
Hi, Holden. How do you keep a PR up to date and maintain it for a year as it's waiting?
Right, okay. So the first one is being sad. And the second one is, to be fair, I think at month number 3, I sort of stopped keeping it up to date and just started updating it once a quarter, which it's okay. Oh yeah, actually keeping your PR up to date is normally checking out master, pulling it down, merging master back into my branch, making sure that everything still works, and that's the process of keeping a PR up to date.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, Holden. Question about Scala 3. So are there any plans to make Spark compatible with upcoming Scala 3? And if yes, what are the challenges?
I don't believe there's like super concrete plans. However, I don't think that there is particular resistance to that. And if you're excited about seeing Spark on Scala 3, you can come and help us be more compatible, which would mostly be just upgrading to the next minor 2 version. Or you can contribute to ScalaFix and try and do some automated migration tools there.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks. I'm going to take this moment to say thank you because I actually have a copy of your book and this is how I started learning Spark.
Oh, yay!
So nice. I can also recommend to everyone.
Thank you.
Now for my real question. So it's probably somewhere in your slide, but we went quick through it. So actually I'm enthusiastic about trying to do a review after your talk.
Yay.
But say I'm the first reviewer, how many other reviewers need to get in and how do you know that these reviewers give good quality reviews and...
Totally. So I'm going to tell you a secret about code reviews. And the bar to do a code review does not exist. There is no qualifications required. Just don't be an asshole, really, right? And it's totally okay if your code review is just like, hey, can you explain this to me? I don't understand, right? I frequently leave comments like that, or I'm just like, I don't know what you're doing. Please explain this to me. And that brings value too, because it tells people about the parts of their code which are confusing, and then often, this ends up either leading to refactoring or comments that are added so that it's more understandable. So just start.
And what is then actually the defining thing that makes it to emerge? Because
oh, what actually gets merged? Oh,
like,
so
what do you need to get a merge?
okay,
basically?
yeah. So to get a merge, you need a Spark committer to approve the pull request. And there's like 60 or 70 of those, I think, give or take.
You mean the PMCs?
No, committers, not just PMC. Is it 80?
Yeah, about.
Okay. Anyways, there's a good group of people, and often I know that at least for myself, when I see someone else has reviewed a pull request first, I'm far more likely to go and take a look at it because it means someone else has told that person a lot of like things that I would have had to do anyways. So I know there's less work waiting for me.
We're going to take the last one. Go ahead, man.
Hey. Oh, sorry. Yeah, thanks for the talk. What's the interaction like between Apache Spark and Databricks' proprietary Spark?
That's a question for someone else.
What is the difference between the Apache Spark?
How do they contribute things back to Apache, or how does that work?
Well, we contribute as much as possible. Obviously, there are certain things that we actually have to keep in order to add other value on top of it. But I think a good amount of it actually goes back, really. And that's true with any other open source company that's actually trying to commercialize it. There is some point where you actually have to draw the line, but I think we try to contribute as much as possible to benefit on the long run. So thanks a lot. Give a big hand to Holden.